Hey everybody, welcome to another Rackspace Office Hours Hangout. My name is Alan Bush and we are broadcasting live from the castle, Rackspace's headquarters here in San Antonio, Texas, and we're joined as usual by Drew Cox. How you doing today, Drew?
I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alan?
Doing great, doing great. It's October. Who knew that that was going to happen so fast this year? Everybody, I
Calendars.
guess. Yeah, everybody did.
Calendars.
Yeah.
They predicted this.
Cool. Well, hey, we're gonna do something here, Drew. You actually have a presentation that's pretty close to you, something that you have talked about quite a bit in the past. It's
Yes.
fire drills. You should do them. And so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to turn it over to you here in just a minute, but I want to say that anybody that's watching, we want to hear from you. If you're there, go ahead and drop us a comment. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you're watching live at live.ohpodcast.com, right below us is going to be a little comment box. Drop them in there. We can get them. If you're watching and kind of dual screening it on Twitter, just use the hashtag CloudQA, and we'll definitely get those as well. So we welcome your feedback. Send it to us whenever you have a comment or question, and we'll bring them in at the end. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Drew.
I appreciate it. And to put a tiny ounce of additional context to this, this is a talk that I've given before, and this is terminology that I use a lot. If you're someone who's been with this show for any period of time, you've heard fire drills used repeatedly, and I think we hint around and talk about them all the time. But this really goes a little bit deeper into how this concept became so clarified to me. It's a talk that I've given before, and for any of you playing the drinking game, my coffee mug is not nearly full enough for this show, so feel free to sit this one out if you so choose. But let's get into it a little bit. Fire drills are something we really do cover repeatedly on this show, and the reason fire drills generally are needed is to verify a plan. Otherwise, you're just hoping that things work. So let's get into a little bit more about this. So my professional background, as viewers of the show, you probably know quite a bit of this, but I've been at Rackspace for 1 month shy of 5 years. All of that was in cloud and managed cloud and dealing with our cloud virtualization offering. And I've worked with everybody. I've worked with hobbyists who are just kicking tires. I've worked with big names that you've heard of. Love startups. Previous jobs have all been in working with or for small businesses, mom and pop shops and the like. And when I've worked with big event customers and high traffic customers here at Rackspace, it's been for all sorts of things: award show, Shark Tank, the Reddit Oprah effect, all sorts of things. And here at Rackspace, we really believe in playing to our strengths, and so I'm structured in a certain way. Everybody's got kind of their own makeup, but Ideation Maximizer and Arranger really play together really nicely for me because they drive me to want to make things as good as possible, think through ways to organize approaches for the best result. And that's something I'm really passionate about. I want to see customer success. I want to see projects go off without a hitch. And because of that, that really makes me into the type of person that I am. And with the background I have, it results in things like this. So let's keep moving. The point of this talk and presentation really hinges around my hope to instill a healthy fear and a healthier curiosity in those who interact with this, who hear this message. And as a San Antonian, we have a patron saint, Coach Pop, and he talks about having a healthy fear, a healthy understanding of the situation, about the fact that you need that fear, respect type of fear of your situation, or you'll go into a situation without the right context and you'll blow something off that should have been taken more seriously. And that's really, at the end of the day, the hope that I have is that you'll take these processes we're going to talk about, these different steps and different approaches that you can take to your application, website, situation, whatever that is, that you'll take them and apply them so that that healthy respect and fear that you have for what could potentially happen results in something that's even more healthy, which is a curiosity that says, well, I wonder what would happen if this were to happen, or I wonder what would happen if I made this change, or let's make this better and better. Again, that's my maximizer coming out. So analogies. There are definitely some components that are going to break down in this whole analogy, but it really inspired a lot of things in my thinking. And so we're going to follow through this process, and you're going to come to another analogy potentially about what these different steps might trigger in your mind. So I'm loving the feedback that I get when I pitch a concept, when I say, this is kind of what I think, what do you think? So feel free to chime back in. Let me know if you have thoughts, if that sparks something different in your mind, but that'll make a little more sense as we keep moving through. So let's get into fire drills. Fire drills are really about the what if, right? In the practical sense of an actual physical room fire drill, it's what if there was a fire in this room, how would you escape? But in our context, that what if changes. So what if a server fails? Or you get hacked, you get hit with the front page of Reddit. That's a totally different situation. You miss an alert because your phone was off, auto scales and auto fail. You get DDoSed, domain expires. There are so many other things that can go wrong. So that what if for you may be different, but that's going to really depend on your situation. And as you begin this process of approaching running a fire drill, different things are going to show up. So back to the beginning of this concept really landing for me. I have a 4-year-old son, about to be 5, and he had an obsession for a period of time about safety rules. He was really concerned about all of these safety things, about what was important for the family, and he would sit us down almost every dinner and say, so we need to talk about safety rules. And he would go so far as to document his safety rules. So here's a picture of one of my son's safety documents. You may recognize this as an MSDS design. I'm proud of that boy. But he came up with this concept of safety rules, and I couldn't figure out where it came from. He was always talking about we need to have a fire plan and a safety plan and all these other things. And come to find out, the fire department had come to his preschool and had talked about a lot of these things. And so that was really impressionable on him, and he really took that to heart. And so he brought home all of this stuff. And I realized I don't think of them that way. When I was in elementary school, when I was younger than that, I was just so excited to have a fire drill. It was like bonus recess. I was ecstatic. This is the greatest thing ever. I get to run around and have a good time. And then in middle school, there's a shift there. You're doing anything you can to get out of class, whatever possible to string on more time during the day where you're not working. And by the time you get to high school, the story is really taken a turn. And do we have to? I don't really want to go. Please don't make me. This is going to be really annoying. And then in college, it really changes because you're in a dorm and somebody pulls the alarm at the absolute worst time, and you're stuck outside in freezing cold weather on finals week, cursing everyone who you could possibly think of. But there's a reason that we do fire drills. There's a reason that we take the time to run them, because when you don't, there's the possibility for some really negative consequences. This is a news story that happened late last year here in San Antonio. There was an apartment complex, senior living apartment complex, that had a fire, and in order to evacuate everyone, that's a really big task with a situation like that, and that's a really big risk to live with all the time. And so it's a sobering fact that without running a fire drill and having an idea what happens when you execute your plan, really, really bad things can happen. So really at the end of the day, this small truth here, trust but verify, is is the underlying tenet of any fire drill. Trust that your plan is good, but verify that it's enough. Verify that it'll work the way you intend it to. So good old Ronald Reagan gets credit for this. But in the spirit of trust but verify, I did some more research. That's actually Ronald Reagan's translation of a Russian proverb. So the lesson continues: trust, but verify that that this is actually the case. So here's the plan that that my son brought home. This is how to create your own home fire escape plan. And we've got Sparky here, who's given us kind of a process, a checklist of things that you can do to make your home a safer place because you have a fire escape plan and the process that you go through to achieve that. And each one of these steps reminds me of something that's applicable to us as a hosting company and to you as people who are using IT to serve up and host a website or an application or whatever the case may be. So we're going to go into the analogies that I can draw here. And again, like I mentioned, as we go through these, if you have something that stands out as a good analogy that isn't the one that I draw, then share that, because that's going to be a valuable conversation. We'll have more of a conversation after this this presentation. So this is my son's version of our house. You can tell how thorough it is, and his plan I don't know that I could follow, so we should probably have a fire drill and find out if what I think that this means actually is what it means and that we'll be safe in case of an emergency. But that was his take on a fire escape plan. But getting into the points that Sparky gave us, the first step is to draw a map of your home, show all the doors and windows. So for our purposes, for a website or for an application, knowing your site is crucial. You have to know what does it do, what are its parts, what are the different components that make up my application, my site, what's being hosted. Without knowing the components in play, you could be in a really bad situation if it's a home and you don't make a plan for the bathroom and you happen to be in the bathroom when there's a problem. That's not going to result in a positive experience for anyone. So without knowing all of the components that you're talking about, you can't have a plan that addresses the entire site. That clearly has become a problem. Next step is visit each room and find two ways out. This is a really crucial component to the analogy that we're drawing, which is review each component and have a fallback. So now that you know what entails your site, knowing ideally we go this route, if there's a problem we can shift gears to this other way, is crucial, because you never know what can go wrong, but you need to have a plan for it, and a backup plan to that plan can be useful as well. So you can't have a bottleneck and a single point of failure without a plan of how to pivot out of that single point of failure if there's a problem. So that may look like failover, that may look like an extremely robust situation that you just hope has enough throughput, or whatever the case may be. Let's keep moving. So in a home, all windows and doors should open easily, and you should be able to use them to get outside. So this is a pretty clear analogy to me about identifying choke points. Where are there likely to be problems in case of this expected situation? So in a high traffic event, where are you likely to see problems? Is there one door that leads in and out of an enormous shopping center? That's going to be a problem because everyone's going to have to fit through that one door. Is there one application, one third party that's involved that every single step along the way has to leverage? Or maybe it's a database call that just shows up all the time. Maybe you should cache that. Maybe you should find ways to alleviate that choke point, but you have to identify where those choke points could be so that you can then remedy or address those. Next is make sure that your home has smoke alarms. Push the test button to make sure each alarm is working. Great for a physical home situation where we're talking about lives and not sites, but in a site situation, verify your monitoring solution. That's what smoke alarms are for. They're there to keep tabs on the general health and fire location. Is there or is there not a fire? For your application or your site, you need to have monitoring in place, and it needs to respond the way you need it to respond. If the battery's good, but the screecher noise doesn't go off, it doesn't matter that it's monitoring and realize that there was smoke in the house if it didn't wake you up. And so your monitoring solution being in place includes things like, does this let me know in a way that I can respond to? Does it let the other people who might be able to jump in and make a change know what's going on? Do I get enough lead time that the alarm goes off before it's an absolute emergency? Are there webhooks that trip the next step, like a deployment of additional resources or something along those lines? Do all the things that my monitoring is supposed to achieve get achieved when an alert gets tripped or when a threshold gets passed or whatever you're monitoring? You just need to ensure your expectations are actually being met. And so got to run that fire drill, make sure that the smoke alarm actually works, the batteries are good. So pick a meeting place outside. It should be in front of your home. Everyone will meet there at the meeting place. That was a little bit of a stretch, and I couldn't figure out what that would mean in the context that we're talking about. And as I was thinking about what piece of the puzzle that would be for a test, I thought about situations where more than one person is involved. So you may have a developer and a couple of ops guys and an automation guru, and you've got this group of people, and you might even have a third party that's doing some of the support. How are they all going to be on the same page so that you don't have two people logging into the same server and starting troubleshooting at the same time, wasting some of those man hours or those resources? What sort of tools are you going to use to ensure that progress is going the way it needs to, that escalations are happening the way they need to? Agree upon a set of processes and a group of tools that can be leveraged, that everyone's on board with, has access to, and can use seamlessly, so that your site can quickly get the care that it needs, no matter who is involved in that process, how far flung or tight that group is. So make sure your house or building number can be seen from the street. That really talks about, you need to be able to find something that's identifying for that location, for an emergency group or for anybody who needs to get to your house. In an example of your site or an application, have a branded sorry page. Have something that even if the rest of the site is having trouble, they're still getting to a place that is you, that is clear and branded and has the value that you intend to deliver, that you intend to communicate for your users. There are so many times where a lot can be communicated well, and it's not communicated well because the work wasn't done to create that sorry page. And with tools like the CDN and things like that, you can really go a long way towards delivering a better user experience, a clearer picture of your brand, and a fact that, yeah, we know there's something going on here. We apologize, we're working on it. And that's a better situation. There's a better chance someone comes back or even is able to get the information that they need off of that page than if you don't have that there and you just get a 404 generic response. So talk about the plan with everyone in your home. And that's really, instead of everyone in your home, it's everyone in your business. So everyone who's associated with the site needs to be on the same page. You need to have a document that lines out the process. If site goes unavailable, then take these steps. If traffic spikes, then take these steps. If. Know what the plan is and have everyone have buy-in, that they know who takes care of what. If you have a DBA that can do ops work, make sure that the DBA stuff gets weighted and prioritized, and the ops work can get done by that guy or the other guys who have a more tailored skill set that direction. You're not potentially chewing up all of that expertise and man hours that your DBA could be using more specifically. So prioritize, document, have that already. So learn the emergency phone number of your fire department, and that's know your escalation path. You may have that ops guy and then that DBA. Well, the ops guy may be the one on call, but at a certain point, he's not going to be able to address the issue. To be able to know, here is the threshold, it's taken me 20 minutes, that's way too long, I need to get the DBA involved, or I've logged in and I've seen this is something beyond my capacity. Who do I get a hold of, and how do I hand this off well is a crucial conversation to have. You may have managed operations here at Rackspace, and you may need to know exactly how to engage that team as quickly as possible. Do so. Engage that team as quickly as possible in 5 different ways and figure out what's the one that's going to work for you. Honestly, calling in is going to be the fastest way to get somebody. If you have the documentation that you can submit in a ticket, that can be really helpful to pair with that sort of a reach out. But know for your situation what that's going to be. Know exactly where you're going to interject that escalation in. So practice your home fire escape. I think we've covered that. That's pretty clear. Practice. You actually have to do the things you're planning, or you don't know what the results are going to be. You're crossing your fingers. It's a hunch. It's a hope. It's a maybe this will work out like I intend. Then that's not going to cut it if you're relying on a backup to restore on top of an image that you haven't verified. That backup may have a corrupted file in it. It may be from a version that's too old. It may have any number of other things that you don't know because you haven't built from that backup. So verify, actually practice what you intend. So those are really the steps in creating a plan, but there's a lot of things that need verification. This is not an exhaustive list, but this really does cover quite a few of the things that you could look at verifying. So we've got monitoring, recovery time, reboots, how long does it take to reboot your device, failover backup, scaling up, scaling down, traffic spikes. There's really a long list here. And each one of these can be drilled in a little bit further, really calling in and getting more advice from an account team on the ones that are specifically important to you would be recommended. But any of these things would need to be verified. If you have a plan that you haven't practiced, then I really recommend digging into those. Monitoring we talked about, that's clear. Backup I mentioned. Actually giving this talk, the last time I gave it, I made the recommendation to go and verify that the domain that you're on is yours for the long term. And it turned out that someone else was giving another talk in another room, and during their talk they went to their example website where their DNS had expired. That's a bad day. You need to verify that the things that you lean on and trust are going to continue to do what you want them to do. And for something like that, an SSL expiration, a domain expiration, those are things that you can set reminders and then make sure that that reminder reminds you in a way that you can respond to, that you have enough of them set up that you can execute the needed change in time. Go ahead right now, actually, if you're watching this live or in the future, stop what you're doing, pause this, go find all of those types of things, every domain that you rely on, and verify that you've got it for the foreseeable future. It's worth the money to ensure that that's not the problem that hamstrings you in a situation like Black Friday, like we've been talking about, some other front page of Reddit event, or whatever the case may be. Some things that you don't usually think about that need verification is maybe you fire an employee. What process do you go through to ensure the security and stability of your environment in that situation? How do you lock down the environment, create that additional layer of security to remove a user from both the account and the devices and the API and whatever other tools may be there? That's a really important thing that you don't want to have to think of all the potential ways that could be a problem when you're in the middle of a conflict with a disgruntled employee or something like that. You need to have a plan that you can execute cleanly and quickly so that you don't put yourself in harm's way in that situation. And then reseller conflicts, that's something that we see that I don't think many people think about, but maybe you're on the seller side, you have a contract with a hosting provider and you sell to your users. Those users want to do an end around and go to your provider, or you're using a reseller and there's a provider on the back end. There can be problems around, that person hasn't paid me and they're trying to jump out. Well, what do you do in that situation? Or I can't get my hoster to do what I need them to do, and I'm just going to try to go around to the people that they're hosting on top of. How do you handle a situation where your hosting provider isn't delivering what they need to? Your as a service isn't delivering what they need to. So there's a lot of different positions that you can look at your site through, your approach through, and see, I hadn't even thought about that. I need to have a plan, and I need to verify that plan works. And that's the whole intent behind a fire drill. All right. Well, there's really a process to doing your fire drill in our context, and it's one of those rinse and repeat type processes. So you have to make the plan first. You can't execute something you don't understand. So document that plan, then schedule a fire drill. You can do that anytime, but I recommend not doing it when you're busy with other projects. Do it in that lull, in that quiet time and off hours. Go ahead and run that fire drill when you get to that point. Identify room for improvement. This, I think there are a lot of people who will run a fire drill and say, we did it, it kind of worked-ish, we're happy. They didn't identify where they could make changes and lower that time to being back up and running, lower that window of downtime to the smallest possible, or be able to react quickly and compress that latency or that whatever the other issue may be. If you don't identify rooms for improvement, implement those changes and then test them, you don't know if you've improved the situation. A backup that doesn't work isn't solved by taking another backup and saying we're good. You take another backup, you verify that backup is good, and then you have a plan you can move forward with. So this is really that process. You can go through it as many times as you feel comfortable. It's a cost-benefit analysis. Do I spend the time to go through this 5 times? Is the 6th time going to be worth the time spent or not? But you need to at least go through the process, document things you can improve, implement those changes, and repeat it so that you can verify you can get through the entire thing in your required time. If you have an SLA to meet, or if you have just a target of, I can't let performance lag this low for this long. Okay. Can you ensure that you have a repeatable process that works the way you need it to get that done? There are some tips and tricks that really can be beneficial when you're talking about addressing this approach, getting to this approach, addressing your site or application. Historical issues are really the best place to start. If you've seen problems with something repeatedly, implementing a plan to address those is good, but if you haven't practiced that plan to know that it solves that problem, you're going to have trouble. So if you have something that's kind of a nagging issue that just keeps causing problems, that's where I would recommend you begin your process of verification of fire drills. That's an ideal place to stop the bleeding on something that's currently causing you trouble. Especially for WordPress and Magento and some of these platforms. If you're using a lot of plugins, that's a great place to go in and verify a solution. So what happens when you have 2 plugins that are in contention? We'll toggle one off, see if that's better, bring it back on and toggle the other off, see if that's better, then turn them both off and see if that's better. And you have to do that with all of your plugins in all of the varieties to know what the best end result is. And so plugins can be a great place to go in and verify the solution. You may find that the content accelerator that you're using doesn't actually accelerate your content that much, but does cause other problems, okay, we'll blow that away, find a better solution. Plugins can be a real tricky place to work through, but trying them in all of the various combinations is going to be your best bet to ensure you're not running into problems. So I mentioned earlier that your planning needs to be done and your testing needs to be done outside of production hours. Also, I recommend doing it outside of your production environment. Test run all of the things that you're doing to change your environment outside of production. That's just a much better approach. If you can create a replica environment, I say go ahead and do that. Build a replica environment. Do all of your changes there. Implement your new features. Push all your new patches and upgrades there, verify that they work, and then launch in production. Anything you can do to keep your production environment in peak hours stable and safe, take those steps. Please take those steps. All right, identify the high value / risk portions of your site. It's really important that you know what the most important thing is. Prioritization is something that's really a theme on this show. If you don't know how to ensure that the shopping cart is as safe as possible, then you need to spend all the resources you can figuring out how to make it sure it's as safe as possible. If it's the marketing needs, or the ads need to render the way they need to render, or your leads need to be captured the right way, you need to take the time to understand how to ensure those things are safe and fire drill those first, verify those first. So in a prioritization situation, you need to identify those that are at the most risk because of a bottleneck or are of the most value because of the way your business operates. Modular solutions can be tested in isolation. This is the kind of thing where, let's say you are testing in production, don't test all the things all at once. Test them in small segments. Test them so that if a piece goes down, you can bring that piece back up instead of throwing a bunch of stuff at a larger situation. That complexity is going to make troubleshooting very difficult. So it's nice to be able to take little bites out of that process. We're going to fire drill our caching process. We're going to fire drill our email process. We're going to fire drill this little piece. That can be really helpful. And then once you've done those little modular approaches, then a load test is going to help you get a holistic view. If you don't know how your site as a whole, as a unit, will respond to high traffic and to a lot of additional eyes or views, it's really going to be a problem. So you've tested in modularity, now test in wholeness. And it's really going to show you where some of those bottlenecks are, where some of those problematic spots are in your environment. So we've talked about load testing in the past. We've talked about monitoring in the past. We have all of these previous shows where we mentioned load testing. Well, there's a correlation between all of these shows. There's a theme that runs through all of the shows that we've done, and I really recommend going back and taking some of those more focused shows on marketing, on monitoring, on load testing, on understanding your application, on the components. Go and look at those and see how they may apply to your fire drill approach. It's really the most valuable thing you can do is to ensure your expectations will be reality and not leaning on something that will not play out the way you hope and pray that it will. So fire drills, do them. I recommend it. And before we move on, I have a fire drill joke that I like. Mitch Hedberg likes to say that if you have legs and are flammable, you are never blocking a fire exit. I find this to be true.
Always room for a Mitch Hedberg.
There always
Mitch
is.
Hedberg quote. I came in this morning and the escalator was, I'm not going to say out of order, but it was temporarily stairs. Yeah.
I'm sorry for your convenience there, Alan.
Exactly, exactly. Cool, Drew. Thanks for sharing this with us. This is great. We've had a lot of actually interesting questions that are coming it's coming in while you were talking. A lot of good ones. A couple of them I think you already addressed, but you mentioned what testing and or Tyler asked what testing and monitoring tools work well with the Rackspace infrastructure, and I think that we've talked about those on all, basically all of the other shows we've ever done. But we just talked to New Relic a couple of days ago, and a couple of weeks ago, and they have a bunch of um, they have a whole suite of tools that are great for testing. We've talked to some of our friends at Load Impact before. They can help you to actually do that load testing. You can also look at Apica and then a whole bunch of other load testing providers that can do that actual load testing. And then our Rackspace monitoring tools, Intelligence is the newer one that's launched. That's really good for that as well. Yep. Um,
Absolutely, the catalog plays in very nicely with all that we've talked about.
yeah. We actually had another one that came in from Joe a while ago. Joe Ashcraft, who was on our show last week, actually did a fantastic job. And Joe, glad you're watching along with us right now. He asked, and I kind of paraphrased it for him, how might you have redundant smoke alarms? So how do you monitor your smoke alarms? That's a great question, Joe. There are a couple of different ways that you can do that, and we actually had some of the folks from our monitoring team on, our Rackspace Intelligence team on, not too long ago, and they talked a little bit about that. And actually, um, we have a blog post here in the Rackspace blog that I think kind of sums that up. It's called "Watching the Watchman" with Agent Health Monitoring, right? So it's a great way to go through it, and you want to make sure that you can actually monitor those monitors, right? Drew is a great analogy. It doesn't matter if if you've got batteries in the smoke alarm, but you can't hear them, and you got to make sure that everything is up and running. So this is another great way to be a part of that and to hear and to see what's going on. Do you have anything else to add to that, Drew? Nope. Okay.
Okay, my mute was dead. I couldn't figure out how to convince it to not give me trouble. So in monitoring the monitors, there's a lot of things to consider. So there's a lot of checks that can be set up from different spots. So you could do a ping check from different regions. So you could have Chicago and London and Hong Kong all do ping checks against your environment. So you have multiple sources of truth for that, multiple places that could turn over a potential problem. You can also use multiple thresholds. So when we're talking about something that's critical versus a warning state, you may have an early trip and then a late trip. And then you may have, like, let's say you have Pingdom and Rackspace ping setup. So there are a lot of ways to verify that no one component is a single point of failure. Monitoring is one of those that can be a valuable place to address. But yeah, monitoring the monitors is the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to uncover as a problem in the situation of an event. You'd never want to identify that, yes, there's batteries working in that smoke alarm, but I just didn't hear it go off in the event of a fire. That's tragic. That's a physical, terrible thing. In a server situation, that alarm going off and telling no one is as negative as that alarm not going off. So there's a few different things to address there. Do you want to send an SMS and an email? Do you want to set up like a Victor Ops and PagerDuty? How do you want to go about ensuring that the information gets relayed to the right people? The end. That's what I got.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Great. Let's see. Um, Oh, Skip, as usual, had some great insight here. Remember to have more than one admin, right? So you're setting yourself up with a single point of failure. If you only have that one admin, does not pass that infamous bus test, where you want to make sure that you can avoid being hit by a bus and still have your admins be in high availability. So have multiple people that are there and ready to answer those questions when they come up. And
Absolutely, a scary scary possibility. So that's the kind of thing where having a partner like Rackspace can be huge, because you can say, I have one guy, he's 24/7, but happens to sleep on occasion, um, to survive. And we also have the support team that can jump in and be a tourniquet on a bleeding site, and then engage the ops resource, or vice versa. You can have an ops resource who gets woken up in the middle of the night, and it's already out of hand to a point where one guy working as hard as he can, no matter how brilliant, can only do so much in so much amount of time. He can then engage a support team to jump in. Those sorts of steps that you can take to ensure that you've covered for your single point of failure. It's no longer all on that one cog in a wheel. Then that's going to be a really helpful step to take. It's a really scary place to be when you identify, oh, that doesn't pass the bus test, or that's a single
yeah,
point of failure I have to address. There are often a lot of ways you can address that, but think through what that might be. In the physical world, you can still have single points of failure that can impact your virtual solution.
very true.
Great point, Skip.
Very true. And another great point from Skip here, going back to our monitoring the monitors conversation, right? So he says that he used to use a separate bare bones cloud host that all it did was monitor the other host. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But if you have a
Heartbeat server or something like that.
heartbeat server somewhere else, yeah, you don't want to have that all of your eggs in one basket, because we've talked about it before, that mythical asteroid that one of these days is going to take out a media or an entire data center, right? Well, if that does indeed happen, we want to be prepared for that, and so you want to have that some type of monitoring somewhere else, and so that's always a good idea to move it somewhere else so you can test it from elsewhere. That's why our
Absolutely.
monitoring, whenever we actually monitor, our Rackspace monitoring doesn't just ping within the data center, right? I mean, we say we're going to take readings from all of our data centers and
Yeah.
send traffic and
We
finish
make
response.
decisions based on a quorum. Like there has to be agreement that there's this issue, and you get to decide, does the agreement mean that
Hmm.
all of the different regions that are checking are are together, or do you have to have two dissenting or three dissenting locations before there's an alarm set?
Right.
So, I mean, you could have a situation where there's some provider issue in London, and so the cable that goes across the Atlantic is interrupted. Well, I think you're probably going to have trouble with your London check, but everybody else is fine. No one from Europe is getting to your site, but they're also not getting to other sites. So you're continuing to feed successfully all of your users from the States and from South America, all these other locations, but that issue um, happens. So being able to respond to that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing where, I mean, we've seen that before, where there are regional outages. There was a massive DDoS that took a decent part of England offline for a while, a couple of years ago. There are other things, like you mentioned, like a cable gets messed up somewhere, and you might not be able to reach people. So yeah, you would certainly address that, right? Because I mean, you're getting some type of a signal in that says, hey, this isn't working the way that we expect it to. But you're not going to take the same course of action as you would if everything was offline. So it's good to know what is offline and have individual plans for making changes as necessary.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point around fine tuning your monitoring. I think that's a really good place where people will monitor well because they know that there's a problem quickly, but they'll skip the steps that help to compress the time from receiving a monitor to having that issue addressed. Um, when you're monitoring, let's say you have an authentication layer, so you want to be sure that your users can log in to their account on your site or your application. To monitor that, you could do a lot of things. You could say, make sure Apache's running on that service so that people can actually see rendered the user password space. Make sure that the database is healthy, because it's the place where you're checking those credentials against the reality of the situation. Make sure that that server is healthy. Make sure you can check all of those things, but when you use suppression in the right way, you can basically have this cascading thing like, here, load the page, and if it loads the way it's supposed to, we're good, because that means that all of the pieces under that are functioning the way they need to. Okay, load the page. If that doesn't work, throw me an error. Well, if it's Apache that's broken, you don't want Apache throwing you an error and the URL check throwing you an error. You just want to know, suppress this one, here's the actual focused problem, so you can jump in quickly and address that issue. If it's the database that's out, you're not going to be able to actually log in, even though Apache is still showing all that stuff. The URL check works, but executing your login won't work. So how have you set up your monitors, and how can you use that data to quickly get to the point and quickly address the issue? Because there's so many pieces in that puzzle. Yeah, you're getting the information. Yeah, you're able to jump in and start work, but do you have so much information when you start, or are you going to have to do all that recon? The more information you have at the beginning, the quicker you're able to get back up and running. So how have you set up your monitors? Have you optimized those so that the moment you jump into the issue, you're addressing the most likely problem with the data you have? So that's another thing that I feel like gets skipped a lot. You feel like, I knew there was a problem in really short order, so I'm happy. You can think through that process and how it went, how long it took, and find ways to clarify your approach, distill that approach, and keep that time scale as compressed as possible, so that you're available as much as possible.
Well, we had another comment that was on here. I think it was mostly a tongue-in-cheek comment about. It was a mostly, I believe, tongue-in-cheek comment from Chris, who said, "Do I have to get up out of my chair and go outside to do this fire drill?" I think he was mostly making a joke there, but that's an interesting thing. Like, it got me to thinking, maybe you do want to test this out from home, or from where the people will likely be. If it happens in the context of, say, Black Friday, right? So it's Black Friday weekend. People are at home with their families and are, in a turkey coma. Maybe you should try to figure out a way to simulate those conditions. I'm not advocating setting an elementary school on fire, but I am saying try it out in different ways.
Don't
Make
advocate
sure
that.
Nobody. Let's be clear. No, but you do want to try them out in different scenarios, right? Because you will very likely not. And that's Murphy's Law, right? The server's not going to go down while you're at the office, ready to flip the switch and get going.
Well, that's one of the points that I really see value in. When I looked at the document that was create your own fire drill or a fire escape plan, one of them that's pick a meeting spot outside, should be in front of your home, everyone will meet at that meeting spot. Being on the same page can be really valuable, and running that fire drill where everyone's dispersed lets can this work, or do I need to have a war room at the ready when I expect this issue? Because we got so much more value out of having everyone in the same place with shared screens that showed these specific vital signs. You may discover that you're able to keep the timeline half as long if everyone's in the same room, or in the same Slack room, or whatever the case is that you find is helpful. You're going to identify those things by attempting your actual fire drill, triaging that theoretical event. Um, and so you may discover by trying it in those ways that Murphy's Law, somebody's on vacation, somebody else is out sick. What happens then? You may identify in that situation that headcount is important, or higher service level is important, or a more robust of that thing that you're scared of breaking would be the right approach.
Good, good. Hey, so here's a couple more comments here. Joe asks about automating fire drills. Should you automate those fire drills? And then mentions a tool that you can use to kind of. I wouldn't say you would want to automate the fire drill itself, but Chaos Monkey is a great tool for automating the actual pulling the plug on your servers. I mean, it just goes through and you can wipe out entire servers and see what happens. So yeah, Joe, that's an absolutely great tool to automate the testing part of that fire drill. But yeah, as far as the actual working together as a team to get the site back up, that's something that you really need to monitor in real time.
Well, that's a really interesting example. So the Simian Army is a set of tools that Netflix has created because they have built an application that is as resilient as possible. Their whole mantra was to create this ironclad, uber resilient, auto scaling, auto repairing behemoth. And so Netflix is an incredible application that has been built step after step after step to be as resilient as possible. And so what the Simian Army does is it's this series of tools. Chaos Monkey is one of them. There's like a janitor monkey and a gorilla suit and all kinds of other things. But they'll do things like take a host off or a region offline or any number of other things. And what that does is it ensures that the other automation around resiliency works the way it's supposed to. So they have a tool that is supposed to pivot around hosts that go down. Kick it out of the pool, replace it with another device. With Chaos Monkey, it's doing that. It's pulling hosts out of rotation to see if the replacement auto-scale device comes up in time. And so they're monitoring all of that to make sure that it works the way it's supposed to, but they've automated a lot of those things, those verification steps, because they're always verifying that the progress they've made is working, that the product that they've provided to their users is as they expect. And so automating it is a really great approach to take, and there's tools that are already out there, like have been mentioned. But Netflix has built a tool that they intend to auto heal, to auto scale, to auto these other things. So they like that automated approach, and so then they built these other tools on top of that verify the automation in an automated way. So that's incepted and fun, but good.
Tools on tools on tools. Well, the kind of those tools that you have allow you to test all of the different scenarios, right? And that's something that that Skip mentions here again. Good fire drill would assume that there's no office, as well as the office goes down but the cloud lives, or vice versa. I mean, there's so many different scenarios that you can go through, and if you I think that the bare minimum, you just need to say that, hey, there's an issue with your hosting provider. I think it's the baseline scenario that you run through. There's some type of an issue. Let's go ahead and test and see what we need to do to get it back online. Okay, now let's test for that asteroid finally hits the data center and takes the entire thing offline. So many different things you can test for. So test as minimum as you can, and keep testing.
Yeah, you start with the historical things that you've run into as being problematic. So when the hurricane hit New York, people just got flooded, and so that is the kind of thing that forced their hand to create a plan for the next time something catastrophic like that happened. There were people who had a plan and were able to execute it in time. It's much better to have foreseen that, but once you have that historical event that's happened and you can look back and say, that was terrible, we cannot afford to do that again, that has given you a real life fire, a real life scenario, and really pressed the importance of having a plan that you can trust will work. So looking back historically is a great way to identify places you can help that. No office, no data center, no rack, no power, no network, no whatever that you've seen in the past. How did you address that? Was that sufficient? Was that barely adequate? Was that amazing? And you're going to have to shout to the rooftops how well your approach ended up working on accident because you didn't verify it. There are all of the situations. So I think that the no office is one of those that everyone's dispersed. No one can get to their typical tools. How do you respond now? And again, that's going to be prioritized. There are eventualities that you could certainly test against. The zombie apocalypse is one of those that the military uses all the time. There's a zombie apocalypse. You think through that thought exercise. How do you then respond? It's probably not something that they're going to fire drill all the time. Maybe a few times, but that would get very expensive to fire drill zombie apocalypse every week. So they have to prioritize, is the thought process and a fire drill identifying bottlenecks and resolving those bottlenecks enough? Are we happy with that? Should we go again? That's something that every business is going to have to. And so I absolutely recommend taking that approach and looking through how far do we need to go down this fire drill path to ensure stability and having a solution that I can trust will work because I verified it. How many verifications you need to do, all of that. So it looks like Alan may have had some technical difficulties. The components that he relies on do what they need to, but let's see what other engagement we've got. We'll try to talk through some of that. So Skip just pinged us with some more input. Years ago, IT director made us pretend that he was on an airplane for hours. It's one of those, the coach kind of reminds me of the New England Patriots allegations that they interfere with the quarterback radio to the coach. I would imagine that people are now in NFL practices working through, how do we respond to that? What set of plays, how much trust do we put in this quarterback? How do we respond? Do we, hold up the big cards to designate the next play? How do we respond if those go down? And I think that's a great example of some of those eventualities. An IT director probably does travel if it's a organization that's in that phase where they're trying to close a lot of business or they're multiple locations or whatever the case may be. There are people who can travel, and having that central quarterback out of the picture, that coach who's calling the shots and directing traffic out of the picture, could really hose up the works, and you might have some real problems in executing your plan if that person isn't there. So how do you respond? And that's where having a document can be really helpful. I don't know what experience you had, Skip, around running that particular event and that fire drill, but having a document that everyone can work with can be huge. So there's a lot of things that we've talked about here. A lot of things we've covered. The list that I gave of things to verify is absolutely incomplete, but you're going to need to prioritize how you go about identifying things that need to be tested and verified. But we will continue using this fire drill analogy as long as the show continues. I think it's very appropriate, and hopefully this show has clarified how you can go in and identify what your plan ought to be, how to test that plan, and then how to go back after the fact and make changes. So that's all for today. I'm going to post the slide deck. It's actually already on ClearSlides, so we can share that out. So but for joining, thanks everybody for being a part of this, and we will see you next week with more content. Later on.